Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Soul Podcasting Podcast. I have an awesome guest today. Her name is Lindsey Sutherland. She is a business consultant, speaker, and entrepreneur dedicated to helping business owners build companies that run with freedom, purpose, and profit. And I'm so glad to have you here. We have a lot of things to talk about today.
I'm excited too, Demetria. Thanks so much for this invitation.
You're so welcome. So I'm glad you're here. And we'll just start off with your podcast because I'd love for you to just introduce your podcast, what you do, who you reach with your show, and then we can maybe find out more about like what inspired you to start your show.
Sure, yeah. Well, my podcast is called the Freedom Entrepreneur Podcast, and it's intentionally designed to help people build freedom businesses. So I was asked today, actually, what's a freedom business? And a lot of people think it's a business that lets me do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, this very kind of sassy feeling. And that was me too when I started. But I've since found that really a freedom business is one that allows you to design a business that fuels your lifestyle. Because when we have a bunch of money, like real estate investors, have plenty of money, they often feel a loss of purpose. So I truly believe that we need a business that stimulates our brain, fulfills our heart, but also gives us the freedom to do the things that we want to do in life.
That is so awesome because, all the solopreneurs I know want that kind of freedom, and they want to be able to just kind of find what works for us and figure out what life has to bring us. And the best way to do that is to listen to business podcasts, to learn, to explore what that means. And so you have the Freedom Entrepreneur Podcast, and you have over 200 episodes, I think.
Mm-hmm. I produce an episode Monday through Friday.
Wow. When did you start your show?
So I started it in 2021. It was before COVID, but not by much.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Wow. And you've just been cranking out those episodes every week. Actually, you said every day, Monday through Friday.
Well, I do now. So when I first started, I did it weekly. Mm-hmm. Actually, if you want to know the whole story, because I think this is an important piece. So people who are starting a podcast, it's interesting, and I've left all my episodes up for this reason because it's really fun to go back and learn. But it was originally called the Passive Income Examiner. So going back to what I was just telling you about, that kind of chip on my shoulder, like I'm going to do what I want. My whole thought was, if I could learn how to build passive income streams, that's the gold mine, right? Like I didn't want to spend all my time on YouTube researching and learning and trial and error. And I thought, shoot, if I start a podcast, I could learn from the experts and then I'll make a good decision. That was my motivation.
Wow.
And I learned over time that I did learn a lot, talked to amazing, amazing people. But I started finding people were messaging me and connecting with me because they were going through a transition. Like this one exact story, like just jingles in my brain right now. This woman gets on a call with me and you could just see the desperation in her face. She's like, I've got to quit my job and I need to replace my 6-figure a month income like in 90 days. What should I do? And I'm like, it hit me. I'm like, passive income is really not passive. You're going to have to put in some effort before you're going to be able to earn your 6 figures I don't want to guarantee anything. And it's like, I started realizing I was attracting the wrong audience. I also was starting to get people who wanted to be a guest on my show that were not in it with heart. They were in it for the pitch fest, And it was discouraging. I started to feel really kind of wayward. Like, did I do the right thing? I felt really like what I was starting was the right thing. I felt like God just gave me that clarity and I was doing it. And then I just kind of like stalled. There was like a year where I did only 4 episodes. And there was a lot of growth, internal growth on my end. So when I pivoted and I rebranded, and I'm happy to dig into that if you want, because I think
Yeah.
that's something a lot of people
Oh,
go
that's so
through,
good.
and I
Please.
learned a lot of things that will be helpful. um, what I did through that though is I then was like, you know what? I am about creating scalable income, multiple streams of income. That's all relevant, but I don't want to mislead people and say it's passive and it's easy, you know?
Right.
And so that's kind of when everything started to shift and come together. Like everything I had learned was all for a purpose. God really did know what he was doing.
Yeah. Nothing's a
So
mistake. It's all
nothing was a
intentional.
mistake. It felt like a mistake a few times. I was like, that was a lot of work I put into that. But no, it all actually paid off. So it was good.
That is awesome. Ah, wow. Like it's just interesting hearing our different journeys into podcasting, and what I'm loving that I hear from you right now is you put in all this effort. You thought, okay, where did I go wrong? After some amount of time and things weren't kind of shaking down the way you thought they would, and it felt like you were attracting the wrong audience. And instead of quitting, you just pivoted. So where did the brand change just sort of happen for you? When was that light bulb moment for you?
So one day I was sitting in my recliner downstairs and it was when Grok had come out. And I had already been using ChatGPT. So this wasn't very long ago. I had actually already rebranded as the Freedom Entrepreneur,
Mhm.
but I still wasn't really heart and soul into my podcast. It was just kind of a thing I was doing. So that did happen prior to that, but it wasn't relevant. What really lit me up and got me re-engaged and the clarity that came with it was the moment that really shifted. And so this Grok thing. So I was experimenting. So I get onto Grok and I'm like, I don't know. And it had a prompt. It said, let me help you build a personal brand. I was like, all right, we'll see what happens. So
Right
it
now,
starts asking me questions like, about my life, my parents, and I'm telling it, we went from Arizona, we moved to Idaho. I have a little 5-acre farm. I'm really about, lifestyle, living the lifestyle you want, blah, blah, blah. I never once told it that I had a podcast or that I had even ever had a brand. Okay. So I just went into it blind and it came out on the other end and it said, you should be a freedom engineer. And I'm like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, well, I actually have a podcast called The Freedom Entrepreneur. And
that's
it was like, well,
amazing.
fantastic. And suddenly it just clicked. I'm like, I really am doing the right thing. Sometimes you just need somebody to come into your life.
Need that little prompting, like just say you're on the right path. Keep going. Yeah.
So true. And that's what it did for me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going all in on this. For me, my whole thing has been very God focused. I was like, I know God has a mission for me. And sometimes, you're walking in the path, but you don't know where you're going,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it can be very intimidating. And that's kind of where I was at. But it just became clear everything I know, everything I've done, everything in my life is leading me to this moment.
Yeah.
And it was so on fire, suddenly everything was on fire. And that's when I committed. I'm like, I'm going all in on this. And I already know that if you produce more content, and I had to re-engage, like reinfuse my podcast essentially. So I want to say it was in the beginning of August when I started doing 5 a week. I thought it was going to be hard. I was like, man, this is going to be really hard. I remember what it was like to do 1 a week.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what makes it easier is I don't worry about video.
See?
Yeah.
You found your rhythm and you found which medium works best for you.
Yes.
And then how long are your podcasts?
Oh, well, when I first started in August, they were still around 20 to 30 minutes because I'm wordy sometimes or I get excited. But I realized another thing that really boosts the algorithm is when it's just like YouTube, when somebody listens to your whole episode or 50% plus, it boosts the algorithm and it makes your shows go up higher on the rankings. And so I thought, man, I've got to work harder at streamlining. And also one other thing I've learned is that people, just because I know this much and I'm making, like for a listening audience, I'm making like a big sandwich, right? And it could be on a specific topic. Like in my mind, it could seem very narrow, but really, I think I could pare that down to like half or less even by just picking one thing of that list, And so it just really I pushed myself to make my episodes no more than 15 minutes, 20 on a pretty long day,
Okay.
but they're really more like 10 to 15 minutes right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, okay, this is so interesting. I love that you are doing your podcasting your way. And for you, that constant, like putting out that content, being of value to your listeners on a frequent basis. Like some of us are more like once a week, twice a week, or even bi-weekly. I have one podcast where at one point it was just once a month. And so I know like there's different ways we can do it, but I love that you have made a decision that this works for you. And that you are like, so you're doing 10 to 15 minute episodes, audio only, because that's what works for you to do this frequently. So I just love hearing like the different ways that we come to podcasting and how it works for us. And then would you say that your audience is really engaged with this particular podcast as opposed to the one previous? Which one has a little bit more?
Well, I think I'm in a part where I'm transitioning audience listeners. And it's interesting too, because I'm actually getting ready to launch a new podcast. Here's a new strategy that I'm in the mix of producing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if you go back and listen to some of my episodes, I would have a lot of real estate investors on my podcast, because when you talk about passive income, that comes up a lot. And other types of investing for that matter. But now I'm like, I want to focus on online business. It's my zone of genius.
Yeah.
And so when I get pitched for those podcasts, I just tell people, no, this isn't an investing podcast. However, I'm launching now a new podcast. It's called Online Business Launch. Okay. So the Freedom Entrepreneur, what I've learned is that it's still a broad audience, even though in my head, it seemed so specific back in time. And it is a great podcast and I love the brand, so I'm not getting rid of it, but it isn't actually very, very specific. But when you have a keyworded podcast, like in this case, Online Business Launch, okay? And then what I'm doing is I'll be interviewing people, service providers. It's specific. It's service providers who want to go into the online space. Mm-hmm. It's an interview only podcast. I'm not going to be producing any of my own content. That's going to continue to live on the Freedom Entrepreneur.
Okay.
But the benefit of this is it's so niche and specific. Now I thought, okay, once I get this cooking, maybe I can go back and create like the Freedom Entrepreneur Investor Series.
Wow. And
take all those people who've reached out that are focused on investments. Now, here's why that's important, because the listener is coming because they're interested in this specific topic. They don't want to hear their brain, if they're just starting an online business, their brain is not thinking about investing. That's just totally taking them in another direction.
Right.
You don't get those binge listeners as much as if you have a very specific topic. Right. But you can have an overarching brand with different content on each type of underling. I guess you could call it an underling.
Like an umbrella topic with subs underneath. Yeah. And I love how you're really narrowing down your podcast ideas and determining which audiences would be better suited for certain topics, and then creating a whole new brand and a whole new niche, very, very tight podcast that focuses on that. So you're absolutely right. I love how you're doing this, your approach to podcasting. I know also I've read that you have a course. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what you do in terms of coaching and helping entrepreneurs. So what is your course about?
So here it is. I help people that want to make money online. Mm-hmm. So when, for example, I started my podcast and for a long time, it didn't generate revenue. And the reason is I went into it with a mindset of, well, I've got to get this many listeners coming and then they're going to come to me, right? It's like build the brand and then. Instead, here's what I've kind of flipped everything on its head. It doesn't matter to me if you build a podcast. That's a great way to build that's an avenue of business, but it isn't a business. The business is the pillars, the who you're talking to, right? Mm-hmm. The transformation you're offering. So I have the 4-pillar framework. And then you could create a product ladder that solves a specific problem for that audience.
Right.
And then I say choose one platform. I typically also recommend like one long form and one short form. Simplify, because it's too overwhelming. There's just too many different things we could be doing.
Exactly.
And it's exciting, but it's also overwhelming at the same time, right?
Oh, I know.
And that's essentially what I teach. And if podcasting is your strategy and you've been putting a lot of time, I mean, it's a lot of time into podcasting, but you're not really making any money. There are specific ways to do that beyond affiliate marketing is okay. It's not bad, but it's just okay. And brand deals are okay too. But these are not a business. These are just cash infusions, you might say.
Right.
So really what I do is I help somebody build an actual business behind the scenes that their podcast can be the driver to, the engine of that cash, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. So it's everything you just said, that podcasting itself is not going to make you any money. You're going to end up spending money to host your show. And so if in order to really infuse that podcast with the resources it needs, having a business and having a business strategy is important. So I love that you teach entrepreneurs how to do that. I also wanted to know so for those of us who, many of us are creating courses, launching products. I'm currently in the process of creating a course, and by the time this episode is released, the course will probably have already been released. But those of us who are, I know, I'm so excited. So for those of us who are doing that, do you have any advice for just like what are first steps for like thinking in terms of, I've got to create an academy or a course or a membership or a product or a service or something that kind of infuses what I'm doing with the podcast. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, well, to start, you can get a very good education listening to my show. I've got tons of content on that exact topic. But the number one thing I would say is focus on the transformation. I think this is the hardest thing for people because for starters, it's like we're going off of what we know rather than what our audience knows. So you want to understand your market. You want to understand market research, how to do that. The second piece of it would be, and we're still talking about transformation, just to be clear. But the second piece of it is oftentimes we have a servant heart, right? So our mission, our heart says, I want to help all these people. And we feel like when we're paring it down so tightly, it is letting people down. And I would tell you it's the opposite. And it's not so much, you hear this a lot with people talking about niching or getting down, and they're very focused on the demographics. I do not talk about demographics. I talk about psychographics. You want to get into their mind. You want to solve a very specific problem for a specific person who has that problem. Mm-hmm. And when you do, you will it's so much clearer for people to take action with you.
Yeah.
Versus when you try to solve too many problems or a bundle of things into one, it's confusing, it dilutes your message, you lose people, it will not convert as much. And like we talked about with the podcast strategy, right? Similar things with the course strategy. When you tell yourself this, tell your servant heart this is what you're going to do to solve that whole problem. Okay. You're going to say, I'm not telling you no. I'm just saying not for now.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Everything we do in business to make sure that before we even start building anything, that we understand our audience, our target audience, and understanding what their needs are. And so, yeah, I love that. And what you're teaching it's what we need to understand before we even start launching anything. So that's perfect.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then also, before we hear more about your course and how to reach you, I just want maybe a quick piece of advice about podcasting without burnout, because you are doing this thing every day. So just really quick pivot into because I know podcasting can be a really huge tool, but it can also be overwhelming, like we mentioned earlier. So what are some strategies, systems that you're using for your podcast to stay consistent without burning out?
I think the biggest thing is to just keep a sticky note up and remind yourself you don't need to be in all the places. When I started, I hired a podcasting coach when I started. And, she gives you the whole formula and how to do it and whatnot. And I was following the formula. And I did a time audit one day and it was taking me 6 hours to produce one episode. And I still had a full-time job at the time. So I'm like, man, this is a lot, But I was doing the video, doing the audio, creating all the graphics, posting on social 3 times a week in every place, creating an email. It was just like, holy cow, there's so much. Give yourself permission to just do what you can do. Create I call it a MAP, minimal acceptable performance. So if that is, I'm just going to do my audio and I'm getting that out there, then that's all you do. If you want to set up an RSS feed to go to YouTube, great. If you don't, that's okay. Yeah. Do what you can. And if it's feeling like too much, look at what you're doing and reduce it. Just lower your expectations of what you need to do. You don't need to be everywhere. It's exhausting and it's just not worth it.
It is. And especially for a lot of those who are listening right now are solopreneurs. So they're doing a lot on their own and without a team, without the support. And even though we have an agency that offers that kind of support, not everybody is interested in having all the hands on deck. Maybe they want to do their own shows and edit everything. And so in that case, we do have to pick and choose our battles. And like you said, we can't be everywhere. And so I love your advice of just do what we can. And what was that acronym you gave us? MAP?
Minimal acceptable performance. And Demetria, I would say to these people, if you're starting out and you truly do build a business like we talked about, when your business is funding you to the point where you can hire Demetria, that's the key, because that's what you want. Start out, build the business, leverage the podcast, but the business is what's going to really make it make sense.
Yeah.
And get you over that hump faster. So then you can hire the team to help you be in all the places, Yeah. And that is so valuable. It really is.
It is. It is. And it can take some time to get there. But when you are ready, it's like, hey, let's outsource what is not our forte and let others do that who really enjoy it. So I appreciate your words of advice and your support for us. I would love to know if you have one more piece of advice for solopreneurs and podcasters, and then how can we reach you to get access to what you're doing with your course and your offerings?
Sure. Well, here's the thing. I always say, go back and find your North Star. Everything you do, whether it's building the business, building the brand, doing the podcast, all the things, okay, they're external. We need to know in our heart, what is our North Star? Why are we doing it and where are we going? And design and think in reverse. This is the thing. I often see people, the way I describe it is like a ladder. You're at the bottom of the ladder and you're looking up and you're like, man, I got to do this and I got to do that. And you're climbing the ladder in your head of all these steps you have to take. Before you do that, go to the end of the ladder in your mind and look backwards and think, where do I want to be when I'm at the top? What does it look like? Do I get to spend time with my kids? Do I get to do this? I mean, write out your ideal schedule and design everything else based on that, because it will help you say no to things that are shiny object syndrome. That's a huge thing. It will help you say yes to the things that are moving you closer to your end goal. So you've got to know what that end goal actually looks and feels like in order to really be successful. So that's the piece of advice.
I love that.
And the best place for people to connect with me is in my Freedom Business Builder online community. I'm more than happy to support you there for free. So that's the best place.
Perfect. So we'll just get that link for you in the show notes for the Freedom Business Builder program. And would love to see what you're doing on a daily, weekly basis over at your podcast as well. So it's been a pleasure, Lindsay. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and having this conversation about podcasting.
Likewise.